The shuttle had no name anymore. Whatever was painted on its side had burned off during what looked like a rough exit from somewhere it was not supposed to leave. It floated in the dark between two systems that nobody charted and nobody visited, spinning very slowly. No lights, no signal, no sound. Ray Donahue noticed it because it was in his way. He was cutting through the dead zone to save 4 hours on his delivery run when his forward scanner picked up the mass. He almost flagged it as debris and moved around it. He had done that before. Space was full of broken things. Most of them stayed broken. But something made him slow the ship down. He could not explain it later when people asked. He just said it looked too small to be dead, and that was the only reason he matched speed with it and sent a short-range ping. Nothing came back, but his scanner said there was atmosphere inside. Thin, mixed, wrong for humans, but atmosphere. Something had been breathing in there recently enough that the recyclers were still trying. Ray brought the shuttle into his docking bay the same way he would move a piece of furniture that was blocking a doorway, practically, without drama. When the hatch opened, the smell hit him first. Blood, or something close to it, and something chemical he could not name. He pulled his breather up over his nose and went in with a light and a medical kit. The first one was on the floor near the front controls. Reptilian, dark green-gray scales, tall, even crumpled on the floor, old scars running across the jaw and one shoulder, newer damage along the ribs. Breathing, but barely. Ray checked the pulse point on the neck the way his interspecies first aid training had shown him, found something close enough to a heartbeat, and moved on. The second one was wedged into the back corner. Insectoid. 4 arms pulled tight around a small frame, blue-black carapace, large compound eyes open and watching him. Not unconscious, watching. Ray held up one hand, palm out, and said nothing. The insectoid did not move. He took that as permission and kept going. The third was the one that worried him most. A transparent oval pod cracked along one side, the seal not fully broken but close. Inside, something amber and luminous shifted and pulsed slowly. Gaseous. Contained. The crack was letting the outside atmosphere in, and whatever was inside the pod was not built for outside atmosphere. Ray went back to his ship, got a sealant kit, and fixed the crack before he did anything else. Then he came back and started doing triage in order. He got the reptilian one onto a carry stretcher and into the medical bay. He set up the second bunk and left the entrance open and the lights low for the insectoid one, which he figured was scared enough without being cornered. He moved the pod carefully, very carefully, on a hand trolley and parked it in the middle of the medical bay where it had the most space. He did not know what any of them ate. He did not know what their injuries specifically needed. He did not know who they were or where they came from or why they were in an unmarked shuttle in a dead zone with no signal running. He knew how to stabilize, so he stabilized. He knew how to keep the air in a room adjusted for multiple species, because his ship had done multi-species cargo hauls before, and the life support system had presets. He ran the atmospheric mix for the medical bay through 3 of them until the monitor showed tolerable across the board. Then he sat down on the stool near the door, picked up his delivery manifest tablet, and started filing the report to Earth's welcome station, because that was what you were supposed to do, and Ray Donahue generally did what he was supposed to do. The insectoid alien appeared in the doorway at some point. He noticed it in his peripheral vision but did not look up immediately, giving it time. Then he looked up slowly, met those compound eyes, and nodded once. It came inside and sat against the far wall, 4 arms still held close. The amber glow in the pod pulsed a little stronger. Ray finished the report and hit send. The welcome station operator who answered sounded like someone who had been awake for a long time but was used to that. Ray said he had 3 beings, unknown species combinations, 1 critical, 1 stable, 1 uncertain, recovered from an unmarked derelict in the dead zone between the Orange system and the nothing beyond it. The operator asked if he knew their origin. Ray said he did not. The operator asked if they were hostile. Ray looked at the reptilian alien unconscious on the cot, at the insectoid one sitting quietly against his wall, at the pale glow in the cracked but sealed pod. He said they looked tired to him, not hostile, just very tired. The operator made a note of that, and then said something Ray did not expect. She said, "Bring them in, we have room," and she said it the way someone says a thing they have said many times before and mean every time. Ray closed the channel and looked at the three of them again. Outside the viewport, the stars kept going in every direction. Somewhere out there, something had thrown these three away. He did not know what yet. He would find out eventually. For now they were in his medical bay, and the heat was running, and nobody was getting worse. That was enough for tonight. The welcome station did not look like much from the outside. That was intentional, though nobody had planned it that way. It had grown the way most things on Earth's frontier grew, through need and budget constraints, and somebody solving a problem with whatever was available. The result was a structure that looked assembled rather than built, a cluster of connected modules hanging in orbit with Earth below and the moon off to one side, lit by a sun that made the whole picture look almost too clean to be real. Ray brought his ship in through the secondary dock because the primary was being used for a supply transfer. A young docking technician waved him in manually, which was either charming or slightly concerning depending on how you felt about automation. Dr. Priya Nair was waiting in the reception corridor when the hatch opened. She had a tablet in one hand and nothing in the other, which Ray noticed because most station officials showed up with at least a security badge reader or a scanner. She had neither, just the tablet and an expression that was already halfway through processing the situation before he finished stepping out. Ray gave her the short version. 3 beings, 2 days in his medical bay. One had regained consciousness roughly 18 hours ago and had not spoken but had eaten a protein ration he left near the cot. The insectoid had stayed in the corner, but had at some point moved the empty ration packet to the small disposal unit near the door, which he found oddly encouraging. The pod creature had done something with the light inside it when he spoke near it. A kind of pulsing response that he did not know how to interpret, but that did not feel aggressive. Priya listened to all of this without writing anything down. Then she asked one question. She asked what each of them seemed to need right now, based on what he had observed. Ray thought about it genuinely. He said the reptilian one seemed to need rest and probably answers, that it had the look of something braced for bad news. The insectoid one seemed to need space and no sudden movements. The pod one seemed to need someone to keep talking near it. Priya wrote that down, all of it. They moved the 3 into the station's medical wing, which was larger than Ray's bay but had the same functional, no-ceremony quality. The reptilian alien, who was awake now and had been watching everything with amber eyes that gave very little away, walked on its own. Slowly, one hand on the wall but on its own. Priya did not rush any of the intake process. She ran health scans that were non-invasive, explained each one out loud before doing it even though she did not know if they understood her, and kept the room at the atmospheric mix Ray had set up on his ship, because she asked him for those settings before they docked. A junior medic on the team made the mistake of reaching toward the insected alien with a scanner without warning. The alien pulled all 4 arms in and went completely still, a rigid defensive posture that made everyone in the room stop moving. Priya said quietly to the medic, "From now on you hold the tool up first and wait. You wait as long as it takes." The medic held up the scanner. They waited. Eventually the insectoid alien's posture shifted, not relaxed exactly, but less rigid. The medic ran the scan from a full arm's distance without moving closer. The pod alien was another matter. Nobody on the station had direct experience with gaseous form species. Priya pulled up what records existed, which were sparse, and then did something that surprised Ray. who was still there because nobody had told him to leave. She pulled a chair close to the pod, sat down and started talking. Not asking questions, just talking. She described the station, what it was, how it had been built, what it was supposed to do. She said it in the same even tone she used for everything else, like she was giving a briefing to a colleague. The amber glow inside the pod shifted and moved while she spoke. It did not pulse in any pattern Ray could decode, but it was clearly responsive. After about an hour, something happened that none of them had a framework for. The pod alien produced a sound, not through any speaker or device. Through the material of the pod itself, a low resonant hum that changed pitch in a way that felt deliberate. Priya recorded it. Then she hummed back, the closest approximation she could manage, and the light inside the pod flared briefly. The reptilian alien from its cot across the room said something in its own language. Short, low. The tone of it made Ray think of someone saying, "Well, I did not expect that." Later, when Ray was finally leaving and Priya walked him back to the dock, he asked her how long it usually took for beings coming through the station to feel safe enough to communicate. She said it varied, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes they never did and they stayed anyway, and that was also fine. Ray said he had not known Earth was doing this, that there were 37 of these stations. Priya said most people did not. They had not announced it, they had just built them. Ray thought about the shuttle drifting in the dark, about how close he had come to flagging it as debris and going around. He did not say anything else. He just walked back to his ship, filed his delivery reroute paperwork, and kept thinking about it the whole way home. The reptilian alien's name, as close as human mouths could manage it, came out sounding like Darrow. He accepted that approximation on the 4th day, which was also the first day he spoke in something other than his own language. His translator chip was old and patchy. It dropped words and sometimes produced sounds instead of language. Priya's team had a newer interface unit they could sync with it, and once they did, the gaps filled in slowly, like water finding cracks in stone. What came through, once it started coming through, was not what any of them expected. Darrow had been a soldier. That part was obvious from the way he moved, the way he sat with his back to a wall and his eyes on the door, the way he assessed every person who entered the room before he let himself respond to them. His species, the Velhari, had a military culture built on a principle that translated roughly as position holds or position ends. You stayed where you were placed. You held until you could not, and if you could not hold, you died there. Surviving by leaving your post was not considered survival. It was considered a different kind of death, the worst kind. Darrow had left his post. He had done it to carry 3 injured soldiers out of a collapsing position. He had done it because they were alive, and he was not willing to leave living people in a place that was about to stop existing. His commander had survived the battle and filed the report. The review board had taken 6 minutes. 6 minutes to determine that Darrow had violated the principle, had abandoned formation, had prioritized individual lives over tactical integrity. He told Priya this in the station's small consultation room with the door open, because he had asked for the door to be open. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she turned her tablet around and showed him a record she had pulled from a third-party galactic database. It was a Velhari military service record, 3 names, a unit citation filed 15 years after the battle in question. The 3 soldiers he had carried out had gone on to serve a combined 41 years. One of them had eventually commanded a unit of her own. Darrow looked at the record for a long time. He did not cry. Velhari did not have that biological function, but something in his posture changed, a very slow release, like a structure that had been under pressure for years finally being allowed to settle. He said, "They did not tell me." Priya said no, they did not. He said nothing else for a while, and she did not push him. Sula's story came in pieces, and it came mostly not through words, but through a new arrangement that the station's young medic named Bex had stumbled into by accident. Bex had been doing a routine check and had accidentally knocked a small personal item off the shelf near Sula's bed. It was a chip, the kind used to store image data, and it had skittered across the floor and stopped near Sula's feet. Sula had picked it up and held it out to return it, and Bex had said that it was not hers, and they had looked at each other, and then Bex had said, "Is it?" Sula had looked at the chip for a long moment. Then she had plugged it into the room's small display. The image that came up was of an alien trader. Not Velhari, not Mulkai, a different species entirely, broad and pale, with a wide face and small dark eyes. The image was not professional. It looked like something taken during an ordinary moment, the trader laughing at something outside the frame. Sula had bonded with this being. They had worked trade routes together for 9 years. When the trader died, Sula had grieved. That grief, open and expressed and directed toward a non-Fenari being, had been reported to her hive. The hive had classified her emotional bonding capacity as a biological defect, a contamination risk to hive coherence. She had been separated and eventually expelled. Bex looked at the image. Then, without planning to, without it being any kind of therapeutic strategy, Bex started crying. Not performatively, just the way humans did when they saw a picture of someone happy who was now gone. Quietly, with a hand pressed briefly over their mouth. Sula went very still. All 4 arms stopped moving, her compound eyes fixed on Bex with an expression that no one on the station had seen from her before. She reached out one hand, slowly, and touched Bex's arm. Light, careful, the way someone touches something they are afraid might disappear. Orvan's account came through the pod, translated through the resonance system. Priya's team had spent a week building with him. His people had voted him out of the collective consciousness for asking the wrong question at the wrong time. 12,000 Mulkai on a failing colony. The collective had run the numbers. Resources required versus strategic value of the colony. The numbers had not favored the colony. Orvan had asked, but what about the 12,000? The collective had answered that the 12,000 were part of the numbers. Orvan had asked again. He had kept asking. He had been voted out of the consciousness for persistent destabilization of collective reasoning. That was the official term. He had been expelled from his own species' shared mind for refusing to stop asking about 12,000 people. Ray had come back to the station for a parts delivery that week. He stopped by the medical wing, and Priya played him the translation of Orvan's account. Ray sat quietly through it. Then he said, "Yeah, that would have broken me too." The amber light in Orvan's pod glowed steadily for the first time since he had arrived. 3 weeks into their stay, something shifted. It did not happen during any formal meeting or arranged session. It happened because Sula asked a question that nobody had asked her before. She asked what she could do. Bex was the one she asked, through the translation interface, in the small common room where the station staff took their breaks. Bex had been explaining their own job to her, because Sula had been watching the communication console with focused attention for several days, and Bex had finally just started narrating what they were doing. Sula's job on the Fenari trade routes had involved reading signals, not machine signals, behavioral ones. She could feel the emotional current underneath formal communication, the way some people could sense weather changes in their joints. 9 years on trade routes meant 9 years of learning what traders meant versus what they said, what delegations wanted versus what they asked for, where the pressure in a negotiation was actually coming from. Her hive had called this contamination. It was in fact a very precise skill. Bex brought Priya in and they ran a test. Simple at first. They played Sula a recording of a formal exchange between Earth Station and a Galactic Council representative from 8 months ago, a routine scheduling dispute that had taken 6 weeks to resolve. Sula listened for 4 minutes. Then she said they were not arguing about the schedule. Priya asked what they were arguing about. Sula said the council representative was afraid of something in his own organization and was using the scheduling dispute to delay a decision he had not been given clear authority to make. The actual problem was internal, and the external argument was a container for it. Priya pulled up the aftermath of that dispute. The resolution had come when the council representative was replaced by a different one, meaning the internal issue had resolved itself, and then the scheduling problem had disappeared within a week. Sula had identified the actual problem from a recording, in a language she was still learning, in 4 minutes. Darrow's integration happened differently. He was not someone who asked what he could do. He was someone who started doing things and waited to see if anyone stopped him. He had been walking the station corridors for daily movement. On his 7th circuit one morning, he stopped at the station's small security office and stood in the doorway for a long moment. The security officer on duty, a tired man named Gregor who was also the station's maintenance coordinator, and on some days the backup kitchen staff, looked up. Darrow said, "Your external monitoring coverage has a gap." He pointed at the display wall and indicated a specific quadrant. The sensors on that side rotate on a fixed schedule. If something wanted to approach the station undetected from that angle, it had a 4-minute window every 40 minutes. Gregor looked at the display. Then he looked at Darrow. Then he slid his chair over and said, "Sit down and show me." Darrow sat down and showed him. Then he stayed for 6 hours and they reconfigured 3 sensor rotations, cross-referenced the coverage map, and built a new monitoring protocol. Gregor filed it with station operations as a collaborative upgrade and listed Darrow as a contributing technical advisor. It was the first time in 3 years that Darrow had been listed on an official document as something other than expelled. Orvin's contribution came through a different door entirely. Priya had been struggling with a communication breakdown between Earth Station and a small species called the Rithali, who had their own form of collective decision, making that individual human negotiators kept misreading as agreement when it was actually a politeness reflex. The Rithali would say yes as a way of acknowledging that they had heard you, not as a way of agreeing with you, and 3 previous negotiations had ended badly because humans had interpreted their yes as confirmation. Orvin understood collective species communication the way Sula understood emotional undercurrents. He was a collective being himself. He knew the internal architecture of consensus-based thinking, how a collective processed input, what it felt like when a collective was genuinely aligned versus when it was producing surface agreement to end a disruptive conversation. Through the resonance system, he walked Priya's team through the distinction. He gave them a framework, not a script, a way of reading what they were actually being told. The next Rithali session went differently. The human negotiator started asking different questions, reading different signals. The session ended with actual agreement, which looked quite different from the politeness yes. It was slower and more circuitous and came with conditions, and the negotiator recognized all of it because Orvin had described exactly what it would look like. Priya wrote up a contact report and sent it to Earth's Foreign Affairs Office. She marked it as a methodology contribution from a station consultant. She was careful with the language. She did not want anyone upstairs deciding to extract the consultant for use somewhere more important. That evening, the 4 of them were in the common room at the same time, which had started happening more often. Darrow with a cup of something warm that Gregor had found approximated Velhari stimulant beverages. Sula watching the stars through the viewport. Orvin's pod near the center of the room, the amber light comfortable and steady. Priya was looking at the wall display that showed all 37 stations, the quiet little map of places Earth had built without announcing. Darrow asked who had decided to build all of these. Priya said it was not one decision. Someone built the first one because there was a need. Then someone else built another because that need was bigger than one station. It had compounded from there. Darrow said, "On my world, That would have required 30 committees and a 10-year plan. Priya said yes, they probably would have gotten around to a committee eventually, but by then somebody would have already built the station. The amber glow in Orvan's pod did something that the team had started to recognize as laughter. The council ship arrived without a request for docking clearance, which was the first indication that the people inside it were not planning to be polite. Gregor flagged it from the monitoring station. The vessel was a mid-sized diplomatic carrier, Galactic Council markings, 4 docking ports but only using 1, which meant it was not here to trade or resupply. It parked itself at the primary dock and broadcast a formal arrival notice on the council's standard frequency, which went to Priya's tablet automatically. The notice said that a formal delegation was arriving to conduct an administrative compliance review. Priya read it twice, then went to the small kitchen and made herself tea, and then went to meet them. The delegation was 4 beings. A Velhari representative in formal military-adjacent attire, which meant lots of structured material and no visible softness anywhere. A Fenari hive speaker, sealed into its own filtered suit, which Sula had explained was what Fenari wore in spaces they considered potentially contaminated. A multi-collective node, a small spherical device that broadcast the voice of a distant collective, which meant whatever was said here was being heard by thousands simultaneously. And a Torathi administrative officer, the kind of species that existed primarily to write things down and make them official. Priya met them at the dock entrance and gestured them through. The Torathi officer began reading from a prepared document before they had cleared the airlock. It listed 3 names, the closest galactic approximations of Darrow, Sula, and Orvan's designations, and noted that all 3 were registered expelled individuals under Galactic Council Social Integrity Framework, Article 11, Subsection 4, which required all member worlds to enforce and honor exile orders within their jurisdiction. Priya listened to the whole thing, then she offered them the common room. The Velhari representative said they were not here for hospitality. Priya said she understood, and she would have the tea brought to the common room. They ended up in the common room. Darrow was already in the corridor when the delegation passed through it. He had positioned himself there, which Priya had not asked him to do. He simply appeared, standing straight and calm in his new station advisor identification tag, and watched the delegation pass. The Velhari representative saw him and missed a step, just slightly, a very small failure of composure from a species that prized composure. Darrow said nothing. He just stood there existing in a way that was apparently extremely loud. In the common room, the Torathi officer picked up the formal reading again. The council's position was that Earth was harboring expelled individuals, which created a legal liability under the framework, and that Earth must hand over all 3 registered individuals for proper processing, meaning return to the custody of their originating species or transfer to a council holding facility, which was the polite name for something that did not sound polite. Priya said she understood the framework's requirements. She then noted that the framework's requirements applied to member worlds. There was a pause. Priya said Earth had submitted an application for council membership some time ago. She pulled the application reference number from her tablet. She said the application was still pending review, and that therefore Earth was not currently a member world, and that therefore the framework's jurisdiction did not formally extend to Earth's sovereign facilities. The multi-node produced a sound that might have been a processing hum. The Fenari hive speaker went still. The Torathi officer wrote something down very quickly. The Velhari representative said that the application had been submitted 3 years ago. Priya said yes, she was aware of that. She said Earth was very much looking forward to the council getting to it. Sula was at the communication console in the adjacent room. She passed a handwritten note to Priya through the connecting window. Priya read it without changing her expression. The note said the Velhari representative is frightened, not angry. The Fenari Hive speaker is reporting everything to someone outside this ship in real time. The multi-node is buying time. Priya said she was sure the council had other business and did not want to keep the delegation. The Torathi officer said this matter would require a formal response from Earth's governing authority. Priya said she would make sure to pass that along and asked if they wanted the response sent to a specific channel. The delegation left without the three individuals, without anything actually, except a formal notice that the matter was not resolved. The Torathi officer made sure to say that on the way out. Priya thanked them for the clarification. After the ship had cleared the dock, Gregor appeared from the security office doorway and looked at Priya with an expression she did not have an easy name for. He asked how she had known they were not members yet. She said she had checked 18 months ago after a different council delegation had tried something similar with another station. She had made a note of it and kept the note. Gregor looked at the viewport where the council ship was now a moving point of light, receding toward the inner systems. He said that was either very lucky or very smart. Priya said it was mostly just filing things properly. Darrow appeared in the doorway. His expression was still the controlled, careful one he usually wore, but something around the eyes was different. He said that in Velhari culture, the ability to defeat a formal military action without raising a weapon was considered a higher tactical skill than defeating it with one. He said he had not believed humans were capable of it until now. Priya said they had a lot of practice at it. Most of human history was people trying to take things from humans, and humans figuring out how to make that very complicated. Orvan's pod drifted into the room. The amber light was doing something active and fast-moving, the pattern the team had come to associate with him processing something significant. Then his resonance system produced something they had not heard before. It took the translation interface a moment. When it came through, it said, "They will come back with something harder." Priya said she knew. She looked at the star map on the wall, all 37 stations, all the years of building things quietly. She said they would be ready, and she meant it, because they had been getting ready for longer than the council had been paying attention. The trade sanctions came through official council channels on a Tuesday, which was not a day the galaxy knew about but which felt appropriate in its ordinary Tuesdayness. 7 categories of goods, 3 mineral supply chains, and 2 shipping lane access agreements were suspended pending Earth's compliance with the administrative framework. It was designed to be painful enough to force a decision, without being dramatic enough to require a vote from the full Council Assembly. Earth's response took 11 days. Not 11 days to comply. 11 days to open 42 separate bilateral trade agreements with species who had been paying Council premium pricing on those same goods for decades and were very interested in alternatives. Several of them had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening. Some of them had been quietly approached by Earth's trade offices over the past 2 years, which suggested that somebody in those offices had considered this possibility and prepared for it, which was either paranoid or far-sighted depending on how you looked at it. The Council's economic bloc began showing stress fractures within the first month. 3 member species formally abstained from the sanction enforcement vote. 2 others requested a review period. The Torathi Administrative Division, whose job was to count things accurately, filed an internal assessment that described the sanctions' projected effectiveness as significantly below threshold. Darrow watched all of this from the station's operations room, where he had been given formal access after Gregor co-signed his advisory credentials. He had spent 20 years in Velhari military strategy. He understood resource denial, pressure application, and what happened when a position was held against a force that had more flexibility than it looked like it had. He told Priya that Earth had done something the Velhari called the deep hold. You absorb the initial pressure without reacting, wait for the attacking force to extend itself, and then apply counterpressure at the points they left unguarded by overextending. Priya said she thought they had just done what made sense. Darrow said in Velhari military philosophy, doing what makes sense under pressure was the hardest skill to teach, and most commanders never learned it. Sula's work during this period became something the station could not function without. The 42 new bilateral negotiations ran through the Welcome Station's communication systems, and Sula was in the middle of every significant one. She had stopped using the formal translation interface and started working directly with the human negotiators, sitting beside them and passing notes, pressing a hand briefly on an arm when she wanted someone to slow down, pointing at a line of text to indicate where the real tension was hiding. 3 negotiations that had been projected to take months finished in under 3 weeks. One finished in 4 days because Sula identified within the first hour that the opposing delegation had already decided to agree and was only continuing to negotiate out of procedural obligation to their home council. And the human negotiator simply started asking questions that gave them a graceful way to conclude quickly. A Galactic Council observer filed a formal note of concern about the pattern of rapid agreements. The note described it as anomalous. Nobody on the station found that description troubling. The moment that changed the larger conversation did not come from a negotiation or a trade agreement. It came from Orvin. He had been working with the station's newly established press office for several weeks, a small team whose job was to produce accurate accounts of galactic events for distribution through Earth's Independent Information Network. The network was not large. It reached maybe 400,000 readers across a dozen systems, which the council considered insignificant. Orvin wrote an account of the colony, the 12,000. He wrote it through the resonance translator slowly over 9 days, and the press office team worked with each section as it came through, cleaning nothing, changing nothing, just making sure the translation held. He described the collective decision from inside, what it had felt like to be part of a consensus that was moving toward writing off 12,000 living beings. He described the moment he had started asking his question, and the way the collective had pushed back, not with argument but with a kind of pressure, a social weight designed to silence individual dissent. He described being removed from the consciousness, the silence that followed, and then the shuttle, and then the dark zone, and then a human cargo ship that stopped when it did not have to. The account was distributed through the press office network on a quiet morning. By the end of the day, it had been read by 4 million people. By the end of the week, the council had formally announced an inquiry into the colony decision. The announcement used careful language that attributed the inquiry to ongoing administrative review. It did not mention Orvin by name. It did not need to. The Velhari military sent a private communication to Darrow. The 3 soldiers he had carried out had filed a formal petition for his exile status to be reconsidered. The communication asked if he would be willing to participate in a review process. Darrow sat with the message for a long time. Then he wrote back that he was willing to participate but that he was currently engaged in advisory work and would need to coordinate timing. He signed the message with his new station credential. He did not tell Priya about it for 3 days. When he did, she said nothing, just nodded, and then asked how he felt about it. He said he did not know yet. He said that for the first time in years he was not sure whether his past was the most important thing about him, and that was a strange feeling. On the 39th day after the sanctions, a small shuttle appeared on Gregor's monitoring display. It was coming from the outer edge, no running lights, spinning slowly, hull scarred, no signal. Gregor looked at it for 4 seconds and then called Priya. She was at the viewport when it came into visual range. She picked up the comm before anyone asked her to. She asked the shuttle if it could hear her. No response. She asked again and said the station's name and said there was room. She said it plainly, the way she said everything. Without performance. Behind her, she could hear Darrow's footsteps in the corridor, and then Sula's lighter movement beside him, and the low hum of Orvan's pod drifting through the open door. None of them had been asked to come. They had just heard the call go out and moved toward it, which was either instinct or something they had learned here, and by now the difference between those two things was difficult to find. The shuttle kept drifting, then very slowly it adjusted course. It was coming in. Priya started the docking sequence and told Bex to get the medical bay ready and went to meet whoever was inside, because that was what you did, and she had a lot of practice at it by now, and she did not intend to stop.